So chaos has been looming for weeks, and it finally arrived uh, after this conference championship weekend. And the worst case scenario for the college football playoff committee happened. And let's talk about that. Uh, Welcome back to another episode of the Transfer Portal CFP Recap Show. Uh, I got it's Brian and Adam once again coming at you after a few technical difficulties, but we made it happen. We made it happen. So here we are. Uh, So yeah, a lot of moving parts were involved on Saturday night and Friday and Saturday night. Um, Probably, yeah, chaos definitely erupted. So let's kind of break it down. Adam, what do you first? Let's start with Friday night. Oregon and Washington, which was the first domino to fall for the college football playoff. Uh, what a game! What a game that was. What's your take on that?
Yeah, my take was shout out to Washington. I felt like they were disrespected after going undefeated, beating Oregon. Yeah, granted, a lot of their wins weren't in spectacular fashion, but they were playing tough teams, and you got to give credit to the other teams, and they still got it done. And to go out there and be a 10-point underdog when you're undefeated and you beat that team, I thought that was insane. Easily the easiest money I've ever made. I instantly went in and put some money on that one. Getting the board, Michael Penix, all of them, they look healthy now. They got a lot of players back and at the right time for this game too. Dylan Johnson, the boys, they look ready. And ironically, they're still still the underdog against Texas, but just whatever Washington needs to do to lock Kalen DeBoer up for as long as possible, they need to do. He deserves everything. That program is in a great spot. I'm excited for him. Well, I'm not that excited. I hope they lose respectfully, but they look good. They dominated Oregon. Yeah, shout out to them.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely felt disrespectful to uh for Oregon to be favored by 9.5 going into this game. I didn't think it was going to be uh anywhere near that big of a spread. It's almost I felt this for a while, and I feel like it's really hard to beat an opponent twice in the same season. And for Oregon, I think that might have contributed to that line. Just looking back, you can it's been hard to lose to beat the same team twice. Usually, when rematches happen during the season, whether it's the conference championship game or in the college football playoff, the team that won the first game usually loses the second, at least historically. Um, but but yeah, I mean, uh, shout out Washington, shout out Michael Penix, even Bo Nix too. I mean, they both put it all on the line. They're both getting their flowers and heading to New York for the Heisman. I mean, these are two guys that were almost written off, after what happened in their previous schools with Bo Nix at Auburn. I mean, he there was a time there where, I mean, he didn't look anything like what he does now. And Michael Penix at Indiana. I mean, the ceiling, he hit his ceiling there, and there wasn't really much more he could do with a program with a program like Indiana. But they go to new schools, and they've made the most of it. And yeah, Washington definitely took care of business, and they've earned their spot in the college football playoff. They did all they had to do, which is, I guess, the criteria. We'll get to that later, but uh, yeah, they did what they had to do. So shut out Washington for sure, just to sneaking that win out. But that was just the appetizer for what was coming this weekend. Saturday hit, and yeah, we were in for quite a show throughout Saturday. That it all kicked off with your Texas Longhorns completely,
Sir.
making a statement in Arlington, in Jerry World at AT&T Stadium against Oklahoma State. They made a statement, and they completely dominated that game, and showed the world that they are one of the four best teams, and it paid off for them, earning a spot in the playoff. obviously, I'll give you the floor. That's your team. Those are your boys. What did you think about Saturday's matchup?
mean, that's the epitome when Sark came in with his introductory press conference. He said we're going to be all gas, no brakes, and that's what they had to do because fortunately, they needed some style points, right? And I think the first 17 plays, the script was perfect. When it was 17 for 17, he had almost 200 yards in the first quarter, 3 touchdowns. Just a marvelous performance, 10 out of 10. Needed it. I wish it was against Oklahoma because I wanted to get them back, but it is what it is. A win is a win. Kind of shove it into the Big 12s. I don't know. Were you able to watch the post game?
Yeah, that was interesting. Um,
They were booing the hell out of Brad Eagle Mark, and he owned it.
yeah,
Shout out to him. He's like, I get it, So he sat there and he took it. He let him have their flowers, but they got it done. Job's not finished. I'm excited. This matchup. I mean, we saw it last year in person, me and you. So we'll talk about more of that later. But
yeah, we did see
excited.
that. Yeah. I mean, that is the matchup, right? Texas and
Hmm.
Washington, they took care of business and they've earned that right to play. But it almost wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for what transpired afterwards in Atlanta in the SEC championship game. Obviously, we're on two different ends of the spectrum here. You're as a Texas fan, you can see the red the black and red G behind me. As a Georgia fan, two completely different results from our programs um, that we got to witness on Saturday. And yeah, so the SC championship game, it was at the end of the day, I just can't explain it anymore. I don't know what it is about Alabama and Georgia that Alabama just gets to, it doesn't matter who's on the field, doesn't matter the record, doesn't matter who's better, doesn't matter the situation. It just seems that Alabama seems to just have their way um, with Georgia, whether it's dominating the game, whether it's some magic, voodoo, something. You can go back in time through the history, through these matchups that they played. This is the fifth time now that Alabama has denied Georgia the shot to win a national championship. Go back to 2012 in the SEC title. That basically it was a de facto championship game with the winner playing Notre Dame. Obviously, Notre Dame had no shot for Alabama or Georgia. Georgia was literally driving 5 yard line, tip ball, gets caught, time runs out, game over. We know what happened in 21 and the 2018 national championship game with Tua and second and 26 after Georgia leading by double digits. SEC championship the year after Georgia leading by double digits. Jalen Hurts comes in off the bench and mounts a comeback and wins that game. And then, now this year, this year again denies Georgia the shot for a national championship. And I mean, at some point, Georgia's got to get tired of that. Georgia's got to get tired of that. And I don't know what they need to do to get over that hump. I think it's a mental point. It's a mental thing at this point. Is uh, they just look scared. They just look scared. They look terrified of Alabama. But it's not like they played terribly. I mean, uh, Carson Beck outplayed Jalen Milroe. You know, for the most part. Um, it was just I don't want to blame the referees, but that missed fourth and fourth call on in the end of the first half, it was clearly an incomplete pass. They didn't review it. They didn't even stop the game. Kirby Smart said it that it's the replay officials in the booth. They usually state it's their job to stop the game, and they did it. Uh, Yet later in the game, Georgia had the same situation, and they immediately stopped the game to review it. Which, I mean, I don't want to. I'm not a conspiracy theories guy or anything like that, but it's a trend that continues to happen. But once again, Alabama somehow, some way, found a way to make it in the playoff, and it doesn't. I mean,
Has to be
from
annoying, doesn't it? As a it has to be
it's
annoying.
very annoying. And I think if you're a college football fan, it should kind of irk you a little bit that we'll get to the playoff selection in a little bit, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, from needing a fourth down stop at versus South Florida in week 3 to being SEC champions and in the college football playoff. Um, I don't know what else. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but I'll actually I do have more to say, but I'll save that for later. Uh,
Well, where do y'all go
but
from here? Is Carson Beck the guy next year, or what's
I
the
mean, so
what's the
far
plan?
it's trending that way. I mean, he hasn't announced anything yet, but Brock Vandegrift, who was our prize
5 star,
recruit,
right?
5-star recruit, blue chip prospect a couple of years ago. He and Caleb Williams were kind of, in that conversation for the best quarterback at the time. He ends up he's in the transfer portal, so there must be some wind of what's going to happen. It reminds me of before last season when JT Daniels announced he was transferring before Stetson Bennett announced that he was returning. So yeah, I mean, I don't see why Brock would transfer if Beck wasn't coming back. I feel like if Carson was on his way out, Brock is the next guy in line. So I don't see why he would leave for and start over when he was going to be given the key. So I think the signs are pointing for Carson Beck to come back. Obviously, we don't know there's what's going to happen with other recruits, but or with other players, whether they're going to transfer, whether they're going to leave. There's been rumblings about some big name guys potentially transferring, um, which would be I think would be devastating for Georgia, especially some guys like Michael Williams who they kind of struggle with edge pressure this season, and they don't have the elite D line that they had the last few years. To lose a guy like that to the portal would be devastating, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, I don't know where Georgia goes from here. I mean, you're on your it looked like they were cruising to a third consecutive national championship, and it literally comes screeching to a halt, just like that. uh the conversation must could be had is, did they really deserve to drop to sixth after losing that? But I keep giving previews, but I'll go on my rant here in a little bit once we talk about the Final Four. But moving on, um, the other most consequential game. Look, I don't want to put too much on Michigan and Iowa. I mean, that
Oh
wasn't really anything. You know, it, I mean, there's not much to say about that, right?
no, maybe skip that one. Congratulations, Michigan. You beat Iowa. Good
Yeah, I
job.
mean, they were there were 22.5 point favorite. There wasn't really much. There was no anticipation. College game day, three of the college game day guys picking Iowa was,
That was
I mean,
hilarious.
was
Just
fun. I mean,
trolling.
yeah, it was a troll. I don't think it meant anything. I don't know. Nobody in their right mind would, besides outside of Ames, Iowa, believe that that Michigan had a chance of losing that game. But the you know the other meaningful game, the other domino to fall, per se, is Florida. The nightcap, what closed out championship Saturday was Florida State and Louisville. Um, yeah, well, what you think about that? I'll give you the floor. Florida State squeaking out that 10-point win.
I mean, just an ugly game. Louisville just I mean, I knew they weren't that good, right? I thought their rating was heavily inflated, but the performance that I saw from them was disgustingly bad. Jake Plummer, 14 for 36 with 100 yards and some change. Horrible interception in the red zone, which I think cost them the game and the ACC championship. Just bad decision making all around. I thought it just looked like a very poorly coached team. You take 2 sacks on 2 separate occasions. You take a sack on fourth down. I mean, the first time, okay. Second time, the coach had to say, "Look, you can't take a sack. I'd rather you throw an interception than take a sack." And they do it again. I mean, it was obvious Florida State couldn't pass, but it's kind of what you expected from them, especially with Thirsting true freshmen. It was expected their offense wouldn't be dominant. I thought Louisville's would be a little bit better. Florida State's defense, shout out to them, man. I feel bad for those boys. They were hooping. Jared Verse, friend of the show, Braden Fisk. I mean, that defense is legit. And the season's not over. They got a chance to win the championship against Georgia, you know. Maybe maybe that'll be their condolences, but
For the
just
UCF.
yeah, pull a UCF, hang the banner. But it was an ugly game. Louisville very, very disappointed in them.
Yeah. Uh yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, you're going in already. You lost your Heisman contending quarterback in Jordan Travis 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. You lose your backup, you know, Tate Rodemaker, to a concussion, and so you're charting out your third string quarterback, who hadn't seen the field all year. Um, and it's I mean, it was an ugly game. I mean, what do you expect out of somebody, out of a team who's playing their third string quarterback who hadn't seen the field all year? There, but shout out there. I mean, let's not pretend that Louisville is not a good team. They're a top 15 ranked team. They were top 10 all year until their loss last week.
It didn't look like a good team the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, I mean, but there's been you can say that about any of these teams that
That's
are in this
true.
conversation. None of them looked world beaters all year. To be completely honest with you, and not even being a homer, the only team that's consistently been good, that like they've looked like one of the best teams in the country, has been Georgia all season. I mean, and that didn't even matter, right? But all these teams kind of show, um, their vulnerabilities throughout the season, but there's only one of them or two of them, uh, that, or no, three of them that have no blemishes. That's Louisville, Michigan, and Washington. Ended up, well, they all three of them won Power Five conference championships at 13-0, which should have put should have clinched a playoff spot, but um, as we all saw on Sunday afternoon, that wasn't the case. So yeah, shout out to FSU. I feel bad for them. I'm gutted for them, and there's really no way to console that or to make up for that. I mean, sure, beating Georgia in the Orange Bowl you know could lessen the blow there, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's a meaningless bowl game. No, it doesn't really. There's going to be opt outs. There's going to be transfers that don't play. There's going to be, uh, you know, prospect NFL draft guys that don't play. So I don't know how you can. It sucks as a college football fan. It sucks, um, but yeah, Alabama. I mean, FSU. I feel bad for them. But that kind of left, as when we all went to sleep on Saturday night, that kind of left, the speculation open, right? We didn't really know what was going to happen. And, you could scroll down Twitter or X
So
or
many arguments.
whatever it's called. Yeah, you can scroll down Twitter or X or whatever and see so many different, you can find 10 tweets with 10 different Final Fours on it, 10 different combinations of the Final Four on it. Sure, there's people advocating for one team and fans advocating for another and against and everything, but uh, I will say, majority of the consensus had Texas and FSU in with Washington and Michigan, and it seemed that made the most sense. Um, and then we all found out on Sunday afternoon that wasn't the case. So, um, yeah, uh, the turn Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama ends up being the Final Four. And what was your what? I'll let you go first. What was your reaction to seeing that Final Four?
um, well, I knew what was gonna once I saw Texas at 3, I knew that Alabama was gonna be 4. Kind of had to be because I don't think Texas would have jumped Florida State. Now, as I think that the committee made the right decision.
Wow.
I don't
Okay.
think, but I here's the thing. I think there was three right decisions. Right, they just kind of chose the path of least resistance, the path that would make the most amount of people happy. Right, because Florida State they went 13-0 and they deserve to get in. Right, Alabama they have one loss to a top five team in the country and they beat the number one team in the country and they won the best conference in the country. They deserve to get in. Texas, they won their division and they beat the SEC champion Alabama. They deserve to get in. All three teams deserve to get in. All three teams are gonna be upset. Florida State, I feel so bad for them because they just had the most. It just seems like they did everything they could do in their control, right? They scheduled an elite Power Five non-conference at LSU, beat them. Played Florida on the road, beat them. Ran through their schedule, won their conference championship. So many things happened that just weren't in their control, and it sucks. But I mean, I feel like that's just how it is, right? If Alabama beats Texas, or Texas doesn't even play Alabama, if Texas beats Ole Miss or Missouri, Florida stays in over Texas. They just happen to play Alabama and win. So even though that had nothing to do with Florida State, you can't put Alabama in without putting Texas in. If LSU doesn't allow 21 points to Ole Miss and they win that game, then the LSU win looks a little bit better for Florida State, right? Obviously, if Jordan Travis doesn't get hurt, you can't control that. They're sitting pretty. If I'm not gonna say it was a dirty hit, but if it was an illegal hit on Tate Rodemaker, if he's able to play, Florida's offense probably looks a lot better. You have a little bit more tape on them. I think they get in if he plays. I think Florida's offense looks better against Louisville. They probably win that game by 20 because Louisville did not look good at all. And you have a little bit more, you get a little more style points. But again, there's nothing you can do. The your third string quarterback. And then Alabama beats Georgia. If Georgia wins that game, Florida State gets in over Texas, I think. But once again, you can't put Alabama in without putting Texas in. So, if the refs make the right calls in the Georgia game, then it's Georgia Florida State. They can't control that. But that's just it's super unlucky. I feel like so many things had to go wrong for them, and literally every one of those things went wrong.
So I'm going to like unequivocally disagree with everything that you just said. Uh, because like what are we doing here, right? Like what exactly is the is throughout the entire when the committee first started, when we first started the 14 playoff, the whole point of it, and they market it on ESPN, it's about leaving no doubt and undisputed. Even when Ohio State won the national championship that year, their hats and their shirts, it said undisputed national champions on it. That's because there's no doubt that they were the best team in the country. They deserve to be in. They won, whatever. But it feels like the further away we get from that beginning, the further away we get from those two facts. Because this year specifically, and we've seen it in the past, neither of those things two. There's two marketing points that they went with. It's the most is everybody has a chance and leaving no doubt. And this year it was neither of those things. And we've seen that throughout the playoffs is that it's neither of those things because you're not going with the like
Well,
there's the criteria is either being most deserving or for they keep digging themselves in a hole because it's most deserving or four best teams because they didn't do either of those things because you can't like first of all what you said is that if Georgia beats Alabama, Florida State is probably in over Texas. So that's literally meaning, and I kind of agree with you with that, but that's literally saying that the Alabama pulls so much weight that because they're Alabama, they're in no matter what.
it's not
Like that
because of
doesn't make any
Alabama, it's
sense to
because
me.
of the SEC champs.
I don't. But what rule was when was that rule made that the SEC is automatically deserves? And
It's
I'm a
not
Georgia fan.
automatically, but I
I'm
mean
a
they've
Georgia fan, and
proven
I
that
100%. You know I I don't I'm an SEC guy. My team is in the SEC. I believe the SEC is the best team, the conference in America or whatever.
But
But
that's why.
there's no rule that you can't. But that wasn't the case. Especially not Alabama. You're telling the Alabama that needed a Hail Mary to beat a 6-6 Auburn team. Alabama that needed a fourth down interception in the end zone to beat a losing Arkansas team, a team that needed to they literally needed to do everything they could to beat a USF team at a group of five USF team. Like if Alabama's resume was given to any other team in the SEC outside of Georgia, they don't make the playoff over Florida State. I guarantee you that. If that was Ole Miss, they don't make the playoff over Florida State.
I
Like,
think
what are
they
we doing
do.
here?
I think
If
they
it's
do.
if it's the four best teams, and look, I'm not even arguing for Georgia. Throwing Georgia out of it. Like, I'm not even going to argue. I'm not even arguing for Georgia right now. But if it's four most deserving teams, which we have seen in the past, it's where they allowed an undefeated Cincinnati in the playoff for going undefeated and beating their only win of significance was Notre Dame on the road, and they made a Desmond Ritter led Cincinnati team got into the playoff and got stomped by Alabama. You've seen Notre Dame team make the playoff for going undefeated and getting curb stomped by Clemson and Alabama. Like
Yeah,
that
but you
that
can't use those arguments because it's a different situation. Like there wasn't eight deserving teams when Cincinnati got in, when Notre Dame got in. It's a different scenario. They kind of got lucky. This is really the first time that we've had legit five. There's four spots and there's five Power Five conferences. All five of those champions deserve a spot to get in. Somebody had to be left out, and one of the teams didn't have their starting quarterback.
but that's never okay. So when Ohio State they didn't have they were on
It's
their third
different.
string
It's different when
quarterback.
Ohio State because the Big 12 was bad, the Pac-12 was bad. There weren't five Power Five champions that deserved to
Sure,
get it got in.
sure,
So
but that doesn't
it's
mean. But they got
different.
in the playoff and they won. They beat Alabama. They got in the playoff as a four seed with their third string quarterback and they won the whole thing.
But that what
You're giving them a chance to at least prove
that's
that they
what I'm
can win.
saying. That's what I said that they needed Tate Rodemaker to play. We saw him play once against Florida and it was bad. We saw what Cardale Jones can do. They beat Wisconsin. They looked good. The offense looked good. They had no clue what Florida State was going to look like.
But you can't decide the fate of a team based on what a hypothetical matchup that we don't like that it doesn't work that way. That's not sports.
I
When do you
understand.
ever see that anywhere in any? There's literally no other sport that does things that way. Shout out Mike Leach when he called this in 2017. Rest in peace to that man. He said there's no other sport in America that does it this way. No other sport in America. NFL, high school football, even FCS football, Division Two, Division Three, NFL, NBA. There's no sport that does it this way. No other sport does it this way. When you have people who subjectively with their own different points of view, and we're all human, we all have our biases. It's ingrained in us to have a bias, and you mean to tell me that them thinking, oh, we can't leave out the SEC, the mighty powerful SEC. You can't that can't be an argument. That shouldn't be
That's
in the
not an
conversation.
argument, but what I'm saying is if you have two teams that both deserve to and one team doesn't have their starting quarterback, like you said, you before you start, you said that you want to have the unequivocally like champion, right? Like Ohio State had the undisputed. There was no question. There would be questions if Florida State got in there because we know that they like do you think Florida State was going to beat Michigan?
It doesn't matter if what I think they would do is that do they deserve the chance to try?
They
Yeah, they
all deserve
absolutely
the
do.
chance to try. Alabama, Georgia deserves the chance to try. There's a lot of teams that deserve it, but if one team doesn't
But
have their
only one of those teams did everything that they literally did everything that they needed to do to put themselves in that position. They were undefeated Power Five champion. They say, well,
there's no rule
don't
to say
schedule.
you have the undefeated doesn't. I mean, there's not a rule that say if you go undefeated, you're a conference champion that you automatically get in. That's not a rule either. Just like the SEC winning isn't a rule. It's not a guarantee.
And why? And also, you know, and I will kind of advocate a little bit for because look, if it was the four most if the it was the four best teams in the playoff to get in,
It's a
you can't tell me.
combination. It's not the it's a combination. I
Well, that's
think
not what they
it's
say
a
though. You see, you have Boo Corrigan going on ESPN and saying it's about having the four best teams to make the playoff. The four best teams. That's the goal. The entire goal is about the four best teams, most deserving, and all these other factors are not in our
yes. And
lexicon.
if
It's
you're
about
not
the four
sure,
best teams.
there's tiebreakers to the four best teams. So I feel like you're about to say Georgia, right? Like
Well,
Georgia.
I'm saying if it's about the four best teams, you can't like how you can't just tell me that and like I said before we start, I don't want to sound like I'm crying or being bitter. I completely understand the argument about of leaving them out. I totally get it, right? They didn't win their conference championship, whatever. But if we're going off the four best teams, you can't tell me that a team who 2 weeks ago beat a top 10 Ole Miss team by 40 points, an Ole Miss team that's going to a New York Six Bowl by 40 points. They won 55-14 or something like that. You can't tell me that team who then the next week went into to Knoxville, Tennessee, and beat them by 20 plus, you know, who happens to by circumstance, and it's by circumstance. You can't ignore the fact that that Alabama was literally gifted 7 points off that 4th and 4 call that was an incomplete pass that they didn't choose to review, and it cost the Alabama points. You can't tell me that a close 3-point loss under questionable circumstances automatically drops a team from 1 to 6, 5 points, and then that argument. Well, the argument for Bama is, well, they beat Georgia, they beat the best team in the country, so they deserve in. Well, now you're saying that Georgia is the best team in the country. Now you're saying that Georgia is the sixth best team in the country. So then that argument goes away. Like you can't tell me that Alabama beat the best team in the country when now you're ranking Georgia behind Florida State. So you're telling me that you saw Florida State play and you saw Georgia play and you said Florida State is better than Georgia at that point, right? Like
Well,
that's
they
it's a
they have
it's already.
tiebreakers in the rankings, right? Like if teams are equivalent, they look at tiebreakers, right? The first is head to head, right? Obviously, Alabama beat Georgia, so they're going to be in front of them. It is what it is. And then they look at conference championship. I think that's why Florida State was ahead of Georgia because Florida State has a conference championship.
So
So
then
let me ask you. So obviously Georgia isn't getting in over Alabama, right? I
I
mean,
mean,
there's no
sure,
way.
sure, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
can't you can't put them in over Texas because another tiebreaker is common opponent.
but it's one of the tiebreakers. It's not the deciding factor. But see, like
I mean, there's conference
we're just kind
championship.
of
There's
we're
strength
kind of just throwing things at like well, first of all, we've both kind of in our discussion, right, in our debate, we've concluded that there's no rules, right? Nothing matters because you're saying that a 13-0 conference champion doesn't have to be in. Well, then there was because and also like I was watching the team and they were saying, well, obviously Michigan is in, obviously Washington is in. Like, why is that obvious? If that's
well,
obvious, but at FSU isn't obvious, then like what's the difference?
they play harder opponents.
You think Iowa is harder opponent than Louisville?
I think Ohio State is. I think Penn State is.
But they've like you've had Washington struggle against Pac-12 teams
Washington beat
that weren't
Oregon twice.
sure. No,
Oregon will run through that conference.
right, but right. That's what that's fine. That's fine. But the point is that there was no like you can't have a hypothetical situation every year to decide who gets it. You have to have the similar criteria every year, no matter what. And that's what made
I
this
think
work
they
for me.
followed the criteria. How did they not follow the criteria? The criteria is when similar teams are on there, and all eight of those teams are similar. There's tiebreakers. They have that set, and they went through each tiebreaker. Florida State, Alabama, Texas, they all were matched up. Well, Texas had Alabama in one of the tiebreakers, so they're going to be ahead. Everybody else, I mean, their strength of schedules were all very similar. I think Texas was by far the best. I think Florida State's was like 25 or something. I don't know, but that's not bad. Their strength of record was very similar. They all three had a conference championship. and then one of them just didn't have a quarterback. Being injuries are a tiebreaker, and so are head coaches not being there. It's just that it just came down to that.
I mean, we can. I mean, we can. We can argue about it, all night. Like I think anybody can, and I think that's the
I mean,
problem with this situation.
it's like there's no way they were going to be right. The system is stupid. The fact that you have 4 spots for 5 Power 5 conferences was never made sense because eventually you were going to get this that happens. You
Yeah,
know,
but you
like
can.
let's say Texas beats Oklahoma. They're undefeated. We have 5 undefeated Power 5 conferences. Then what do you do? Do you right? Georgia wins, Texas wins, Florida State wins. We were 2 games off from having that happen.
Yeah, but see,
It's just
I feel like that's a different. That's a when you have five of the same thing, then you can kind of look at certain different aspects and situations of it. But they weren't five of the same thing. You had three different circumstances, which I come like I completely agree with you. I just like if there was a the that I think Texas kind of boxed Alabama and Georgia into a corner
they did,
where where
and Florida State because of that.
I mean, I, look, I would have been like I said, I'm not mad that Georgia didn't make it, but I feel like FSU deserve to be in. And but like and then an argument as well that I
See,
saw.
I don't,
I'm using as Georgia as an example here because that's what the argument that I saw that I read about was that they said that um like we didn't feel that unequivocally is one of the four best teams. If they don't win their conference championship, the criteria is that if they're unequivocally one of the four best teams, no matter what, they deserve to be in the playoff. Right? That's what they said.
I don't think you can say that this year about Georgia.
Right? I know, but you talking like that but are you saying like you can't say that they're unequivocally one of the four best
No,
teams in the country?
I don't. They haven't been that dominant. I don't think you can say that.
I mean, they
Last
played
year,
them.
last year you could, right? But this year, I don't think you can say they were undeniably like the best team. Like they struggled against Auburn, right? They beat South Carolina by like 10. Carson Beck hasn't been just lighting it up. Like you can say that they're the best team, and you're probably right, but unequivocally, I don't think you can say that.
Besides the head-to-head loss to Alabama, they have a better resume than Alabama. Alabama needed a Hail Mary prayer to beat Auburn. They lost. They beat.
Didn't Georgia need a
You look.
game-winning drive too?
I mean, yeah, but it wasn't a. It's a different. They were winning the game. They were winning the game late. They had a they made a defensive stop to win that game. They didn't need a
Oh,
a Hail Mary play.
I
But
mean,
but that's a mute point. But if you look at you talking about resumes, you put resumes out on the table,
mhm.
and you want to say like that's one of the criteria is head to head, right? But it's not the only criteria. And you can argue that you can put those four
That's the
teams
first
on the
one.
table, and
I
and
think that's the most important.
you could put you. I can argue. I could honestly argue that you can easily could have convinced somebody that a 14 playoff of of Texas, Alabama, Georgia, and then one of Michigan or Washington in that criteria, and you can make the argument the way we're making the argument now, and
I
then
mean,
you could
I don't
justify it.
disagree. In my opinion, the 4 best teams, in my opinion, are Washington, Georgia, Texas, and Alabama. Those are the 4 best teams. Like
I agree.
if you have to go with that, but you can't. That is assuming, right? You have to look
Yeah,
on what they do on the field, right?
nine of Michigan's wins came against teams with losing records.
I
Nine,
completely I would have
nine.
loved Michigan to be out instead of Florida State because I think Michigan, the fact that they I forgot who they were supposed to play, but they bought out of that contract and schedule just cakewalk through all their games except for Ohio State. I think that's lame. And then they
and
got to
and
play Iowa.
and it, yeah, it's just like to me, and like I said, everything is subjective. Uh, to me, if you have uh there, it my last point is it just feels really weird how close how much of a hand or how close how involved ESPN is in this whole thing because they own I think all but two or three bowl games. It's owned by ESPN Entertainment. These bowl games are, they I think a lot of they drive a lot of the decisions that are made in college football. The Pac-12 literally died because of ESPN, essentially because of the TV contracts, and then you have them be kind of the driving force behind the college football playoff. They come out every week with this special for the rankings, and they make all this money. And to tell me that you know they had no kind of a say of saying, hey, a Florida State team with the backup quarterback versus against Michigan, or an Alabama team against Michigan, which one is going to make more money, which one's going to bring in more ratings. And I feel like if that even was even part of the discussion, it throws all integrity out the window. I mean, you can't have that discussion. You can't have that discussion and put that and put that thing on there. You think Major League Baseball wanted the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Texas Rangers in the World Series? It was the least World Series of all time, least watched World Series of all time, but it doesn't matter because they were given a shot to play in the playoffs, and they were given the opportunity to prove that they made their way to the World Series and deserve to play in that series. When the Bengals and the Rams played in the Super Bowl, you think anybody wanted? I mean, those markets, or the Cincinnati market over a team like the Patriots or the Chiefs or something like that. I mean, that's just what happens. That happens sometimes. All the championships the Spurs won were the least watched NBA finals of all time, but they deserve to be there. You can't have that. I just hope that wasn't a part of the discussion, but you can't tell me that it's not. Like, and the SEC having a multi-million-dollar contract next year, TV contract with ESPN next year, it doesn't have a say in that. I mean, at least in my opinion, it's naive to think that wasn't part of the discussion. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I don't know if ESPN specifically made a phone call, but I definitely the committee was thinking like, well, like no, I know that nobody wants to watch Florida State versus Michigan, and to say that didn't play a thought into it, I think, like you said, is naive because it definitely did. Was it the deciding factor? I don't think so. I think if Florida State was more deserving, they would have put them in because I mean it's still a big, like, I don't
I,
think it was that bad. Was it a factor? Yes. Was it the deciding factor? I don't think so. But I
uh,
agree. I think ESPN and I hate how these broadcast companies have such an effect on college football and the rankings too. Like all these, these schools, these getting these unnecessary rankings. A lot of that has to do with they want nice fancy numbers next to their names when they're broadcasting these games and stuff. So I
yeah,
completely agree.
and my the argument I hated the most was saying, well, this is TCU's fault, because of because
No,
of
I think that was stupid. I mean,
what
TCU,
TCU did in the national championship game. That's why this is TCU's fault. They have, like, what? Like, that doesn't make any
yeah,
damn sense. They won their playoff game. They've won more playoff games than 90% of the country.
that's a
There's only
casual. That's
yeah
casual talk. Whoever's like,
yeah.
I
Shout out
saw.
Stephen
I
A.
think I
Smith.
saw. I saw a couple people say that. A
Like,
couple reporters who get paid a lot of money by these. I'm not gonna call anybody out, but by these companies that we're talking about said that. And I was just like, okay, that doesn't make any
yeah.
sense because TCU dog walk Michigan.
Yeah. I'll call somebody out. Stephen A. Smith. Every time I watch him on First Take talk about college football, he was saying that a two-loss Alabama team should have been in the playoff last year. Like, that's just ridiculous. It's just like, that doesn't make any damn sense. So, but it doesn't matter, right? I mean, Josh Pate said something interesting, was that this was because it's the last year of the 14 playoff. They threw all precedent, all real anything out the window because it doesn't matter, right?
True,
They don't have to do this again next year. So what does it matter?
right?
They literally could have done whatever they wanted, and it wouldn't have mattered, you know. But it's a travesty for college football to have 13 people who aren't aren't they're old rich white dudes making decisions of who should play based on turning the game on and watching it on a Saturday without really any real sense of uh expertise or anything like that into it. Like, that you've had former secretaries of state be in part of the committee. Condoleezza Rice was part of the committee at one point. Like, what is she? Who is she to just because she was a position of power, she deserves to decide who's in the college football playoff? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Put people in who know the game. I think, what I think, and I don't want to harp on this too long because, like I said, it literally doesn't matter. They need to have one. This is what way I would do it, or and maybe and then you can maybe you can tell me how you would do it. But I think every program should vote on one representative. Every college football program should vote on one representative to represent them on the committee, and then they all vote on the top 25, or they all vote on the playoff system, like similar to the AP poll, right? But every team gets a representative, whether it's a coach, whether it's a player, whether it's whoever, right? Everybody gets a representative. The people who are actually there in the facilities, playing the games, playing these opponents, and they get to decide who's in the college football playoff or who gets to be ranked. Um, that's the way I would do it,
Yeah.
But
How I would do it is you have the CFB committee, right? Whoever that is. I think it should be more than 13 people, maybe 30. I think 13 is, I feel like you can't get a good average based off 13 people. But, and then you have the AP, and then you have the coaches. We already have all these three polls. I would take the aggregate of all three of those polls. And then, and maybe if you want to do like the football power index or whatever you want to use that too, that's fine. You have four. And then you take the average. If everybody comes up with their top 25 and you take that average, and then that's it, instead of just one committee, because AP, they're separate people, and the coaches are obviously they're in the sport, right? Take those three, find the average of those three.
because the AP poll after this weekend was Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Florida State, and then Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah, and then who know
Um,
what the coaches poll would have been. Maybe Florida State's three and Texas is four, and then that gives them a bigger boost. Also, Washington, Michigan, the 1-2 thing that matters as well.
yeah, yeah, it does matter, but
So
it's just uh, I don't
it's a
know.
shitty system. It's a
It
shitty
really is.
system. Somebody's
It,
gonna
it,
get screwed.
and it's still like it's still the way the rankings, like, when you lose matters, because if the number one team loses in week 10 by 3 points, they drop maybe two or three spots realistically. If they lose a really close game to another top 10 team, they drop two or three spots. But they lose that same game in the conference championship and they drop five. Like, I mean, that, you can't tell me that they lose five spots after being number one in 11 of 13 polls this year. But I mean, it's fine, whatever, they
So
lost.
then let
I
me
get
hear
it.
yours. Like if you were in that committee right now, you know everything what that happened. Who's your top four?
If it's going to be, I would put Washington one, I would put Texas at two, Alabama three, and Georgia at four.
So you're gonna
Because I
leave out
feel
Washington?
no, Washington is one. I said
So you're
Washington,
leaving out
Texas,
Michigan.
Washington, Texas. You know what? Yeah, I'd go Washington, Texas, Georgia, and Alabama. I would make that be those top four. If it's the four best teams, that would be the criteria, because that's my criteria, the four best teams, right?
So you're leaving out Florida State too then.
Yeah, yeah, because I guess that's like, it's four best teams. It's the four best teams. I think those are the four
Okay.
best teams, right? But that wasn't the point. The poll, like the precedent of the college football playoff, it wasn't about the four best teams are. Like that wasn't the precedent. But if you were asking me who was the four most deserving teams, I would say Michigan, Washington, FSU, and Texas, and I would leave out Alabama and Georgia. So that's my two different criteria: the four best and the four most deserving. Those are the only two criteria that should matter: the four best is Washington, Texas, Alabama, and Georgia. The four most deserving: Michigan, Washington, Florida State, and Texas. And that's the only two ways you can look at it. Those are the only two ways that it should have gone, in my opinion, because you kind of threw both out the window and just went out and they go with what what they what they just wanted to do anyway. But that's the way that I would have done. If you
I
ask
agree
me,
with that.
hey, who are the four best teams? Washington, Alabama, Georgia, and Texas. Not in that order, but if in order, Washington, Texas, Alabama, and Georgia. Okay, who are the four most deserving teams? Michigan, Washington, FSU, and Texas. I mean,
I
that's
agree with that. We're on the
it's that
same
easy.
page. We're on the
It's that
same
easy.
page.
It's the easiest to explain. What if you ask me if I was on the committee, right? And they say, give me why you think that? Why did you come up with this decision? Okay, on the four most deserving. All right. Well, the three undefeated Power Five conference champions who played out of conference games against other Power Five schools who finished in the top 25. Some of them finished in the top 10. They won all their games. They won their conferences against ranked opponents. They deserve to be in. Texas, they showed, but they struggled a few times in the middle of the season, but the last 3 weeks they've showed they're one of the best teams. They dominated the last 2 weeks, and won their conference championship in dominating fashion. Okay, why are you not putting Alabama in? Well, because they struggled. They struggled significant. They struggled pretty much. You can almost make the argument that they had a chance to lose majority of their games. Not that they'd lost, but they had a chance. They weren't. They did not. They didn't really dominate anybody all season besides Kentucky maybe. Um, they needed a, a miracle, a 1% play to beat a 6-6 Auburn. They beat a losing Arkansas team who finished I think 4-7, or 4-8. Um, they needed to they beat them by 3 points. They lost by 10 at home to Texas. They barely squeaked out a win against a group of five team. So that's why they're out. But it's that easy. It's really that easy. You know, they could have easily made those decisions and explain it where to have the least discourse, but that's not what happened. So, you
Yeah,
know,
they
but
did.
it doesn't
They,
matter.
they, they took the easy way out.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Next year you have the 12-team playoff, and
I mean, we're gonna do this again next year. It'll just be who gets in Oklahoma or Ole Miss.
but see, but
The same
yeah,
thing.
it's gonna, but I don't think it'll be in this magnitude because I think when you're arguing,
You say that now.
you can look at other sports where like nobody really argues the last seed to get in. You know what I mean? Like, you know, if and look at the NFL. You have a 6-6 George Falcons team leading their division who's going to get into the playoffs. They're probably going to get demolished by you know uh they're going to get demolished by Dallas or the Eagles wherever they play. Um, but I mean, but they won their division, so they deserve to be in the playoff. If I was making the perfect college football bracket, you get all 10 uh conference opponents, all 10 conference champions get in the playoff. If we're doing 12 teams, you get all 10 conference champions and then two wildcard teams, at large teams, because usually there's probably two or three of
There's
them
no
that are
way you can do
actually.
that now.
I mean,
Not with how the conferences are now. You're gonna end up
yeah.
leaving
Well,
out.
obviously,
You're gonna end up leaving out
yeah,
Oregon or
yeah,
Washington or Ohio State
yeah.
or
Well, I mean,
Liberty.
not necessarily, because if you have, let's throw away the Pac-12, right? They don't exist anymore. Rest in peace to them. So you have nine conferences. So you have nine conference champions automatically get bids. And if you want to do 12 teams, you get three at-large teams. So let's say the three at-large teams are uh, uh, Georgia, uh, Oregon, and Ohio State. Would that really be such a terrible thing? Like,
Yes,
would you argue against that?
yes, 100%.
That that SMU gets to be in,
I
but
don't I don't want to see Miami,
Missouri?
Ohio in there and not Texas or LSU or Penn State or somebody else. I
I
don't
mean,
want to see that.
but it happens. It happens. It happens in other
No,
sports. You
no,
know,
I don't,
uh,
I
uh,
don't know about that one.
a 10-6 Patriots team misses the playoffs over, or a 10 and an 11-6. Um,
Well, that's different because they all play each other.
but
Miami, Ohio isn't playing the same schedule that Texas is.
I mean, neither the NFL, they don't play every team every year. The only sport
I
that really
mean,
does that is the NBA.
they play most teams in their conference that they're going up against. They play every team in their division twice,
I
and
Yeah, I mean, it is harder. College football is a lot harder to judge, but there's got to be a better way. And but I still agree that next year with the 12-team playoff, the argument between 12 and 13 is not the same between 4 and 5 because 4 and 5 have a chance to win the national championship. So right now, based on this criteria, but and I hate when people bring up this criteria as a basis for next year because it doesn't matter. They're not going to judge the way these teams are next year. They're not. I
I
promise
think
you
they
that
will. I
they're
think you'll see more SEC bias. I think you'll see Ole Miss or LSU get in over, I
yeah,
don't
but I
know,
don't.
Arizona, even though
But
Arizona has a better record.
I've seen people say like I don't want to see Georgia and Ole Miss play again. Like they've
But
already
that wouldn't
played this
happen.
year.
I
But
don't
that
think
that
that.
wouldn't happen. But I'm saying like there's going to be. It's naive to think that they're not going to adjust the rankings to prevent those types of things.
Yeah,
They say that they don't do that. They say that that's not part of the criteria, but it is because last year, TCU lost their conference championship and didn't even move because they didn't want Ohio State and Michigan to play
yeah,
in the semifinal. They wanted them to potentially meet in the national championship, so they left TCU the way they were, so that Michigan plays TCU and Ohio State plays Georgia, so that they could have a potential Ohio State Michigan natty. That would have been. You can't tell me that that's not part of the conversation. But anyway, yeah. But next year they're not gonna. It's not gonna be the way it is. They're not gonna judge. It's not the way that IP top 25 looks now. It's not gonna be the way it would look next year based on the criteria of a 12-team playoff. There's gonna be different factors involved. But I think I think that so right now like the 12th team is Oklahoma and the 13th team no, that's the AP poll. But anyway, either
Oklahoma's
way,
12.
yeah. So 12 and 13 is LSU, 12 is Oklahoma. But like I said, do either of those teams have a realistic shot of winning the national championship? No. But could you say that Georgia has
I
a
think
better
this year they
chance?
do. I think Oklahoma beat Texas.
Yeah, that is true. Texas did
Right.
have the worst loss of the three or four contending or for the last spot. Uh, Texas had the worst
Well, you
loss of
can't
the
say they
most.
had the worst loss because one team they beat lost to them. So
Yeah, but when you're looking at the losses, I think they had the worst loss because Georgia's only loss was to Alabama, and Alabama's only loss was to Texas,
you
was
can't
already.
say Alabama has a worse loss when Texas that loss was to Texas. I feel like that's like a double entendre. I don't know. I think I used that word wrong, but that doesn't
Well,
make sense.
I
You
think
say your
well,
worst loss was to me. I beat you. Your worst loss was to me. It's like,
yeah, but I think it's not like you're not looking at it exclusively. If you separate the two teams, the head-to-head matchup, and say which of these teams had the worst loss,
well, then yeah, sure, I
you
guess.
can say that you can say that losing to Oklahoma was worse than losing to Texas because Texas is a top four team now. Same thing with Georgia. Their loss was to top four Alabama. They had
Yeah,
you can argue that Georgia had the quote unquote best loss because their loss was a 3-point
they
loss
did.
in a neutral site
They
versus
did.
Alabama who lost by 10 at home. So you can those arguments are there. All those arguments are there that you can make. Um, but we could talk about this all night. Uh, and I don't want to I don't want to make this a 2 hour pod. So but it was good. It was good debate. I mean, it goes to show how flawed the college football playoff is, um, and how the voting is. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. It's a flawed system, and that's why you just get. I don't think anybody was wrong. Heard a lot of arguments. They all make sense. That's how you know the system is flawed when everybody can make an argument that's right. You got a bad
Yeah,
system.
yeah, that's definitely true. But well, yeah, well, that's it. I mean, 13, 14 weeks is over. It's it. It's done. Another college football playoff regular season in the books. I mean, I feel like we were talking about uh, you know, Notre Dame and whoever they played in Ireland. I forgot who they played in Ireland. I feel like we were just talking about that, 15 weeks ago, and here we are at the end of the season. So bowl season is up next. Stay tuned for that. We'll have predictions, previews, articles, podcasts, tweets, everything, the whole nine. A lot of good matchups. Um, we didn't even get to talk about the Group of Five conference champions. Shout out Liberty getting the New York Six bid for the Group of Five. So there was so much going on in the top four that that kind of, I think a lot of good stories got SMU winning the AAC. Them
It is.
winning that before going to the ACC and officially breaking them from the death penalty they received 2 decades ago or however long ago it was. But yeah, so that's it's over. A lot of interesting games coming up in bowl season, but we'll break it all down in our previews. And um, yeah, that's it. Adam, any last words? Shout out before it's ended. I want to shout out Adam. I mean, the things that you do for the transfer portal, your editing, your TikToks, I mean, you do a lot more behind the scenes that people will give you credit for, and you deserve the recognition. So I thank you for another season of you working so hard for everything that you
Appreciate
do.
that, brother. Do it because we love it, right? While we're here, we
Yeah,
love it. That's why we get so passionate about it.
yeah. Recording a podcast at midnight when I have a 5 a.m. flight.
It's
But
chaos. It's college football.
that's what it is. That's why we love it. But yeah. So thanks to everybody for listening, watching, uh, inputting, commenting. We appreciate everything. That wraps up another season, and let's kick off bowl season coming up in the next couple of weeks. So that's it for me. Any last words?
Texas is officially back.
Hey, job not finished though.
Job not done. See you next
So
time.
have a good one.